Welcome back to the Battle Buddies podcast, where we believe that you should not take on the world alone. Hello, Gabe.
What's up?
It is a good day to record a podcast.
It is way past so many technical issues we have had.
So many.
And the fan just turned on, which is great.
We're not even lying to you guys. It took, the last 30 minutes to set this
45 at least.
Oh, man. It was wild.
Well, my computer said no, so I changed computers. And that one was like, maybe. But now we're good.
Yeah.
So here is your episode.
Yeah, we bribed the computer with some cash.
With cash.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's how computers work.
Yes. The sentient computer. Anyway, I'm really excited for today's topic because we're talking about this particular phrase, which is do hard stuph.
Do hard stuph.
Yes, I love this phrase. And let's kick this off by kind of defining exactly what we mean by do hard stuff. Do hard stuph. Do you want me to say stoof for the whole podcast?
We'll say stoof unless we say stuff.
Gotcha.
And when we say stuff, we actually mean stoof, but sometimes stuff comes out. So to kick it off, if you'd like me to, the idea of doing hard stoof, well, the phrase was sort of put together in a goofy way. I like to spell things randomly and weirdly. This is a random quirk of mine, and so I spelled stuff S-T-U-P-H, and two of my coworkers, I'm pretty sure independently, started calling stuff stoof, because they'd see a lesson plan of mine or whatever, and it'd say stoof on it, and so they'd start saying stoof, and that became a thing for no other reason than sheer randomness.
Yeah.
And then after that, there came the phrase when we were talking about fitness. This was a couple of years ago, I think. We started using, maybe a year ago, we started using the phrase do hard stoof. And what do hard stoof meant was, it's just funny to say it though, the idea of doing hard stoof originated from one of our talks, and it was just sort of a way for the kids to remember the phrase. It was a way for them to remember the phrase. It's really all it was. And I honestly thought little to nothing of it until it started becoming almost an anthem, which I was a little surprised by. I went, oh, I didn't think this meant that much, but the kids thought it was funny, and so they started saying it more, which I guess was sort of the point. And it was memorable, and then they'd start saying it about it to themselves, and so it sort of transitioned all the way back from a malicious misspelling to an anthem. It's kind of a strange
it's funny how
transition.
Things can turn out like that.
It really is, right? No one knows in the future what something's going to look like.
Exactly.
So what do hard stoof means is it's forcing yourself to do something difficult. Do hard stoof is a term that you use when something is hard, especially when you don't want to do it. So it's an anthem against weakness. An anthem against weakness. I had a coach I was fortunate enough to work with named Elliot Marshall, and he was a former MMA fighter turned MMA coach, became a pretty successful coach too. He also trains and coaches with Amal Easton. He said something that I thought was very related, and he said that if something scares you, you should go do it. And that was his phrase. If something scares you, you should go do it. As in, if something is uncomfortable to you or scary, we'll talk about uncomfortable in a bit, or scary to you or hard, that is probably the thing that you should go accomplish. Yeah,
for sure. I remember I started taking brown belt tests as a 10-year-old. And that was before we had the difference between junior and senior tests.
Me too, man.
And after my first test, even though I passed, I was so intimidated by the thought of doing that again. And that was the closest I ever came to quitting martial arts.
Wow.
Yeah. I've told this story to a couple of our students, and it blew their mind when I told them that. But I came pretty close to quitting martial arts, and my parents were like, no, you can't. Like, you're so close to black belt. You can't. You have to keep going. And I'm so glad they made me keep going. Because when you're presented with a challenge or something that you fear, you have a choice. You have a choice to either take it on or to hide. And when you choose to hide, the almost sad thing is that you're missing out on the reward of taking it on.
Yeah. There's
so much treasure almost that you can get from doing something that's a little bit that's painful.
Yeah, I am a strong believer in the idea that if something's worth doing, it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
If something's worth doing, it's not going to be easy. And so that being said, that hard thing, correlation doesn't always equal causation, but that hard thing most likely has some meaning to it. So take your example. Yeah, imagine if you said, all right, this is too much, I'm throwing in the towel now. Imagine how different your life would be and how many people wouldn't have been affected and how many people wouldn't have had your influence, right? A small decision to break out of your comfort zone can mean a world of difference.
Yeah. And I want to provide a little bit of context for our audience here. When we talk about our Crucible tests, which are our brown and black belt tests, we purposely make those hard and we purposely make the standards very high. So to achieve a black belt, you need to do 500 push-ups, 500 squat kicks, and 500 super crunches. On top of running 3 miles, on top of loads of martial arts techniques, on top of sparring multiple black belts, on top of what we call free rolling, but is really just jiu-jitsu sparring, and a eskrima.
And you're showing all these things
yes,
all together in the same day,
mm-hmm.
and you're supposed to show them the proper way, which is the hard part because you're tired and you go, this is not easy.
Yeah, and you look at something like that, and it's easy to look at that and just be like, I can't do it. Like, I don't think I can do that. And that's what I thought after I took my first brown belt test. Even though I passed, I was like, I can't do that again. Like, that's hard.
Yeah. The thing that came to mind when you said that actually was my Krav level 2 test.
Mm-hmm.
Where I went, oh, gee, I just went through all of that on my level 1, and now I'm going to go do it again. Isn't this the definition of insanity? Going and doing the same thing twice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems like it's insanity, but I would argue that it's not because they say insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you are getting a different result because you're improving with each time, right?
That was good. Good job.
Yeah.
You get a high five from across the table.
Let's go. Boom. One day we'll change our setup and we'll be able to have real high fives.
Sure. Yeah. Although I don't think I want to sit that closely to you.
Oh.
Off of that, the idea of something meaningful being difficult to do, I think that a lot of the difficulty achieved in life, sort of like what you said, is a grower. When we use the phrase award direction, not perfection, awarding small amounts of improvement. When you do something hard, you are building yourself up to difficult things. And I know we'll talk more about that a little bit later. What I wanted to do, if we could, is talk a little bit about revisit, I suppose, the black belt lull. I know we've talked about this before, but I wanted to talk about comfort. And I think comfort is the confidence killer. The competence killer, excuse me. Comfort is the competence killer. And the confidence killer, I suppose. But here's what I mean by that. When you are in a place of comfort, normally that is a void of growth. Most comfortable places are void of growth. Not all the time, but whenever you try to learn something, right? Episode 2, competence ladder. Whenever you try to learn something, you are stepping out of that which is comfortable to you to take on that which is difficult, which is hard. And so doing hard stuph sometimes means getting out of that comfort zone. And, it makes sense that we're in the comfort zone because the comfort zone is comfortable. It's why we like sitting on the couch doing nothing. It's why we like playing video games for hours and hours. It's why we like taking a nice hot shower or sleeping in late. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but to challenge yourself sometimes means getting up and doing something, or trying a cold shower for once, or waking up early in the morning to go, work out or something like that. Those are the things, while not bad on their own, the things of comfort are ultimately not doing you any favors. Now, there is something to be said about rest, and I know this is definitely something that we will miss if we don't talk about it enough. And that is, there are times for everything. There is a time for resting. But if that's the only thing I'm ever doing, if I'm only ever sitting in what's comfortable, how am I going to improve myself? And so the way you improve yourself is work a little bit harder than the last time.
Absolutely. After I got my black belt, it was such a new world of martial arts that I was opened up to, that it was almost like all the new stuff was just motivation to train. I was like, I want to absorb all of this.
Yeah, but not always. Yeah. Not everyone thinks that way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a healthy mindset to have. Here's mine, and I know I've said this already too, so I'm repeating. My black belt experience was that of the least amount of growth. When I first got my black belt, my growth stopped and stagnated because I thought I had achieved what I wanted and therefore didn't need any more growth, which, of course, as we talked about in episode 2, is not a healthy place to be. And so the proper growth would be sort of like what you said, where you go, oh, so much out there to learn. Not everyone thinks that way, unfortunately. A lot of people look at that and say, oh man, I'm not even close to being wherever I could be. But don't let that stop you from getting any further, right? A lot of people say, this is a little bit off topic, I suppose, but a lot of people don't progress because they're not going as quickly as they could. Mm-hmm. And if you just heard that and said, that doesn't make any sense, that's because it doesn't. The people who say, man, I'm just not really good at this, I'm not getting where I want to be. Well, yeah, you're not any closer to where you want to be if you don't do it.
Yeah. And
so moving a little bit is better than complaining and not moving at all, right? I said that today. I said to the students in Battle Buddies, I said, you are not doing yourself any favors by complaining about not getting anywhere. And when you wallow in that sense of failure, you're not getting any closer to the goal.
A great quote I heard once, I don't remember who it was by, and again, if I said this on the podcast already, apologies, but it's because it's a great quote. It was, I may walk slowly, but at least I never walk backwards. Right? And in essence, you might think of staying in the comfort zone. You might think of that as, oh, I'm not walking backwards because I'm staying right here. I would argue that staying in the comfort zone is walking backwards, because then
muscle. It either gets bigger or gets smaller.
Exactly. And so if I came in and I learned some white belt techniques as someone who had never done martial arts before, and I learned like a front kick and a few punches and stuff like that, and then from there I never practiced anything else, I never practiced higher ranking techniques, and I never even practiced my martial arts again, I'm going to get worse at the things that I practice.
Just today, I was taking, right over there, I was taking Delaney's Kali class. I was like, man, I am out of this. I haven't done this in a while. And it was rusty. I've done those moves thousands of times, and I still went, ooh, I need to shape this up just a bit.
Yeah. But that's why it's so important to consistently trying to be challenging yourself and doing those hard things. And you look at people who are like ultra marathon runners and stuff like that, and those people are crazy, by the way. How they do it, it's beyond me. But really, how they do it is they train, they work
Yeah.
hard, they understand that it's a slow process, but they're always willing to challenge themselves.
Yes, there's a great quote, and the guy who made it is really smart. What was this? Oh, it was me. That was me. Sorry, that was the worst lead-in. One of my favorite quotes is, there are few problems in the world, if any, that can't be solved through more training.
Yes.
And so the problem of this thing is hard, well, go practice that hard thing more and it becomes easy, right? The more you do something that's difficult, the easier it becomes. And I think that another place that comfort can stack up to is, I'm trying to think of a less strident word, but I'm just going to go for it. Comfort stacks up well with suffering. And suffering is I think, a guarantee in life. It's a guarantee. And so, if it's going to come in some form or another, I would rather be somewhat prepared for it, right? So, in our line of work, our suffering comes from our tests or our certifications or whatever, where we have to do a Krav cert and work out hard and get tired and get sweaty and do many, many hard things for 3 days straight, 8 hours a day. You're not a brisk, sprightly human after all that. You're tired. But the more you train for that, for lack of a better term, the more you train for that suck, the less suck it will be.
Yeah. It's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy per se, but it's not going to be as bad as if you train for it a lot, right? The more you train to do something uncomfortable, the less uncomfortable that becomes. So prepping for something uncomfortable really is doing it, maybe in a smaller sense, but the more you do that, the easier it shall be.
Yeah, and I kind of want to shift a little bit and take this topic of doing hard stuff down a little bit of
Doing
a
hard
different...
stoof?
Do hard stoof.
Doing hard stoof?
I want to take it down a little bit of a different road, which is, we talked about why it's important and the benefit of it, and I just want to look at the same thing but from a different angle. Some of my favorite times as an instructor are promotion ceremonies.
Yeah.
And we had our first one in a long time
it's so great.
last night. But we've still been able to have promotion ceremonies for our brown and black belt testers, and every time we have one, it's almost like the beginning of a new era, because it's like a new era where these people are now this ranked and they're now further in that leadership position, and the only reason that they got there is because they decided to do the Crucible test. Like, they decided, I'm gonna be a crazy person and do this incredibly difficult thing that not a lot of people do, and because of it, there's so much reward in the end. We always do, as instructors, we always take some time to say some positive words to the people who pass the Crucible test. And some of my favorite stories are talking to those people who, it's like, hey, like, we remember when you were at this point, and now look where you are. Like, look at how much you've improved. I remember a distinct phrase Sensei would use a lot of the times during promotions. He would say, is remember where you've been and look at where you're going.
Yeah.
But that specific part, remember where you've been, like, that's the reward in doing hard stuff. That is the reward right there, is like seeing your improvement. And
seeing where you've been.
You know, exactly. And knowing that, hey, I could have chosen to stay in the comfort zone. I could have stayed in that spot, but I didn't.
Yeah, you were hungry, and it proves it, because the fact that you're a black belt means that you were hungry enough not to stay at the brown third, and so on and so forth. I agree, though, that the Crucible promotions, as amazing, and I don't want to undercut them at all, because they're so great, and I'd say the highlight of my instructor career is whenever there's a promotion, an advancement, when the white belts become yellow belts, the green belts become blue belts, whatever. Those are so wonderful for seeing the kids progress. Absolutely amazing. Don't want to undercut that. The Crucible promotions, where they're moving up to those brown belts, are so much sweeter because of what they've gone through, right? I remember getting my green belt. I remember getting my blue belt, roughly. It's a little hazy because that was 4,000 years ago. But when I got my brown belt, when I got my black belt, that I remember clear as day. That I remember clear as day because of how meaningful it was, and the students too. I remember some of them taking their intermediate promotions, their green belts or whatever, but I also remember them getting their higher belts and how much more it meant to them because of how much suffering you put in. When you put in a great deal of suffering, you get out a great deal of joy when it's over.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, okay, this is going to be a strange example. Bear with me. Having a baby, which is something I've never done and something I will never do. Having a child, from what I've heard, is painful. Moms out there, you can attest to this. I can't. Having a baby is painful. But when your baby is born, you look at that child and you're not thinking, well, that sucked and this is all I got out of it. You're thinking, none of that matters anymore. This child that I'm holding in my hands, this precious, one-of-a-kind human being that I gave life to, was worth every hour, every second, every minute, and every hour of what I just went through. And in the same way, I think sometimes the greatest suffering leads to the greatest reward.
And another reason that we make black belt testing so difficult, and not just black belt testing, but brown belt testing as well, is we want the students to be able to apply this to their lives.
Yeah.
Because we want them to understand that, hey, life really sucks sometimes. Like, you are going to just go through some hard stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
not just physically hard either, right? I think mentally hard.
Yeah, and too. Emotionally.
Yeah, and emotionally hard.
Yeah.
I think that stress drills, for example, just in the martial arts world, stress drills are a form of emotional conditioning because that's when your brain says, my body hurts and I want to shut off, but I can't because this person is choking me, and if I give up right now, I fail. But doing the defense is so hard. And it's in that moment where you're starting to build up that conditioning to the fear of hopelessness and dread of what you're going through, which I think in the long run does help your emotional wherewithal, where you're more confident under stress. You're more able in times of hardship. I've said this to some of the junior instructors, and this is something I got from Jordan Peterson. He said, you should make it a goal to be the person at your father's funeral who everyone can rely on. You should be the person who everyone can go to for strength, because the alternative is you're going to be one other person, miserable and without hope or light. Not to make light of grief. Grief is a strong emotion, right? I understand to some extent what grief feels like. It's not fun. But in that scenario, you want to be the person who people can rely on, because then it's less of a hardship, less grief, because you can bear some of the burdens, right? That's one of the things that we're called to do as Christians. We're called to bear the burdens of other people, and called to as leaders too, I think. When someone is suffering, we go alongside them, right? Suffering, here's a little sidetrack, rabbit trail, here we go. Suffering alone, so much worse than suffering with someone else. Why is it? Because when you're suffering with someone else, you have someone there with you who understands what you're going through. Pretty much perfectly. If they're doing the same thing, they understand what you're going through. And they understand, this is not easy. This is not easy. And I understand where you are right now, and you understand where I are, and we get each other. That's why suffering with someone else is so much better.
And what I think is the difference between the Crucible test and life in general is the crucible is optional suffering.
Yeah.
Life is required suffering. And you know, that sounds sad, but like it's true. Like
it's true though,
yeah,
man.
you're gonna have highs in life and lows in life. Like I'm not trying to be sad or anything. I'm not saying like life is just gonna be the worst. No, that's not what I'm saying. There's gonna be great times, but there's also gonna be hard times. And that's what the crucible does, is it serves as a warning, saying, hey, whether you like it or not, whether you choose it or not, there are going to be emotionally, mentally, and physically hard times in your life. There's no other way I can describe other than just hard
it's a
times.
warning and an encouragement, because it's saying there's going to be hard times, but you can make it out the other side. Just like this test, 9-hour test that you're going to go through, it's going to end. And when it ends and you pass and you get your belt, you're not going to remember the test anymore, right? The valley that you are in will eventually turn into a hill. And it might take a while. It might take longer than 9 hours. It could take years sometimes, right? But you can get through even the hardest times, because we are very strong individuals. We are a very strong creature.
It reminds me of Indomitable Spirit when we talk about that with the kids. I remember the theme that Sensei likes to push with them all the time is, you are made of some tough stuff.
You're made of some tough stuff.
Maybe it's vibranium. Who knows?
Maybe it's vibranium.
But in reality, it's true. Like, you're made of tough stuff if you choose it, right? And I want to be careful saying this, because I don't want to make any judgments about anyone. But if you choose to weather the storm and to not give up and to keep fighting and to choose to challenge yourself and to condition your mind and your body, then you're choosing to unlock that which you already have, which is the strength that is inside of you, the ability to overcome those challenges. You have that. Are you going to choose it? Are you going to choose to stick to your guns even when everything is crashing down?
Yeah, here's a metaphor. Metaphor time. Here we go. If you picture yourself as you have a fight that you are going to wage, I think of a lot of things as a conflict. Call it a weird Gabe eccentricity. There is a war you must wage against life itself, as in the hardships of life. Given the fact that this is a war that is inevitably going to happen, would it be wiser to live an easy, comfortable life until it wallops you, takes you out? Or would it be wiser perhaps to prepare yourself mentally and physically too, I suppose? Martial arts is about physical preparedness and mental preparedness. But if you choose to prepare yourself for life, then that war against it will not be so one-sided, and perhaps you won't get walloped, and maybe you're the one who does the conquering, right? You don't let the hardships of life define you. You let them build you. You've been listening to the Battle Buddies podcast. Now, there was a lot more in that episode that we filmed. Unfortunately, there was a big oopsie in the technology portion, and as I'm not the most technologically savvy, somehow I ended up losing the back half of the episode you're listening to. We talked about a bunch of things, but ultimately the main thing I wanted to tell you guys before we head out, of course I'll try to find the rest of the episode maybe on a later date, we have a new guest coming soon. In this next episode of the Battle Buddies podcast, we'll be joined by Coach Julio Villarreal of Combat Sports Academy. Sorry, Coach, if I botched the last name. I just realized I've never said it out loud before. Julio is a coach at Combat Sports Academy down in Dublin. He is one of my coaches. I've had the privilege of working with him on multiple occasions, including my Krav Maga certifications. He is famed to be part of the group that has one of the hardest Krav Maga certification processes in the Krav Maga Alliance. And we'll be talking with him a lot about the same things we talked about in this episode of doing hard things. And then also we'll talk about why setting a high standard for your instructors and your leaders is so important. I hope to catch you there in the next episode of the Battle Buddies podcast.